Han had traveled across 3 star systems to reach Research Station Meridian 7, and now he was about to ruin his first impression by falling on his face. The station orbited a purple world covered in crystalline forests. Through the massive observation windows, could see the spinning slowly below. He had studied their species for 2 years, learned their customs, practiced their greeting rituals. But nobody had warned him about the slippery floor tiles in the ceremonial chamber. His equipment case caught on his boot heel, stumbled forward, arms windmilling, his carefully prepared speech notes scattered across the polished floor. He crashed into a decorative plant that released a cloud of orange spores. For a moment, the entire chamber fell silent, then started laughing. He could not help it. The absurdity of the moment overwhelmed him. Here he was, humanity's carefully chosen representative, covered in alien plant dust, sprawled on the floor like a fool. The laughter burst out of him, genuine and uncontrollable. It echoed through the high-ceilinged chamber. That was when the lights began. Every young in the room suddenly blazed with color. Their crystalline spines, which ran from the base of their skulls down to their lower backs, erupted in cascading patterns of light. Blues merged into purples, purples into golds, golds into brilliant whites. The light pulsed in waves, perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of laughter. The adult froze. Their own spines, usually dim and static, flickered with what would later learn was shock. 20 young stood transfixed. Their multiple sensory appendages swayed gently, their large eyes fixed on. The lights in their spines continued cycling through colors that, according to the briefing materials had memorized, did not exist in normal biology. His laughter died in his throat. He scrambled to his feet, suddenly aware that something was very wrong. The cubs were not moving. They just stared at him, their spines blazing like living rainbows. The head scientist who had invited to the station moved with surprising speed for someone whose body was mostly made of crystalline plates. She positioned herself between and the cubs. Her sensory appendages extended fully, scanning each young in rapid succession. "Nobody move," said. Her voice came through a translation device that turned her clicking sounds into human words. "Medical team to ceremonial chamber 7. Priority 1. Unknown biological event." The chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Adults rushed to their young ones. Medical staff in silver suits poured through the doorways. Scanning equipment appeared from wall panels had not noticed before. Through it all, the cubs remained motionless, their spines still glowing with impossible colors. Stood very still. His heart hammered against his ribs. What had he done? Was this an attack? Some kind of human-carried pathogen? The briefing had assured him that humans and had compatible biologies, that simple contact posed no risk. This was not simple contact. This was something else entirely. One of the cubs, smaller than the others, broke away from a medical technician. It moved toward with quick, skittering steps. The lights in its spine pulsed faster. "No," reached for the cub, but it dodged her appendages with surprising agility. The young stopped directly in front of. It tilted its head, studying him with eyes that held far too much intelligence for a child. Then it made a soft chirping sound and gently touched one of its appendages to his hand. The spine lights flared brighter, chirped again, the sound almost musical. Made a complicated gesture with her appendages. 2 security officers appeared and carefully guided away. The cub went willingly but kept its eyes on until it disappeared through a doorway. "You will come with me," said 2. It was not a request. They walked through corridors of smooth white material that glowed with soft ambient light. Others moved past them, their spines flickering with what's translator labeled as curiosity and concern. News traveled fast on the station. Led him to a small room with a single chair and no windows. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Sit said, "We need answers." Sat, his hands shook slightly. I do not know what happened. I just laughed, that's all. I laughed because I fell down. It was funny to me. Funny, repeated. She moved closer, her sensory appendages extending towards face but not quite touching him. Explain this concept. It means something that makes you feel joy, something unexpected or silly. Laughter is how humans express that feeling. I have studied 73 species, said. I have 240 forms of emotional expression. Never have I seen anything like what just occurred. Do you understand? In 100,000 years of recorded history, no juvenile has ever displayed those colors. Those patterns do not exist in our biology. His mouth went dry. Are they hurt, the cubs? Appendages. She was silent for a long moment, studying the data streams that appeared on transparent screens around them. No, they are not hurt. Their vital signs are normal. Better than normal, actually. Brain activity is elevated. Neurochemical levels indicate a state of extreme pleasure, but the spine illumination continued for 9.7 minutes after you stopped making the sound. That should be impossible. I am sorry, said. I did not mean to cause any problems. Problems made a sound like breaking glass that the translator rendered as bitter amusement. The collective has spent understanding biological communication. We are the galaxy's experts in xenobiology. And you, a human who has been on this station for less than 1 hour, have created a phenomenon we cannot explain. The door opened. A in deep purple robes entered, its spine pulsing with colors that's translator labeled as authority and displeasure. I am Council Elder, the newcomer said. Human, you are confined to quarters until the Council determines if your species poses a threat to our young. Your presence here may have been a mistake. Wanted to argue to defend himself, but what could he say? He had no idea what had happened or why. He had simply laughed, and somehow that simple human expression had triggered something unprecedented in an alien species. As security officers escorted him through the corridors, caught glimpses of the cubs through observation windows. They were being examined by teams of scientists. Their spines still glowed faintly, like embers that refused to die out completely. Pressed against the glass of one window as passed, the young spine flared bright gold. Its eyes followed until he turned a corner and the cub disappeared from view. In his assigned quarters, sat on the edge of a bed designed for anatomy and tried to process what had happened. He had come here to build bridges between species, to foster understanding between humanity and the wider galaxy. Instead, he had created an incident that might end humanity's relationship with the collective before it truly began. His communication device chimed, a message from Earth, from the Institute. They had already heard about the incident. They wanted answers he did not have. Looked out at the purple world below and wondered if human laughter, something so natural and universal to his species, might be something dangerous to everyone else. He did not know that across the station, 20 young were refusing to sleep, all of them asking the same question in their clicking language. When will the human make the joy sound again? The emergency council meeting started at what's body clock insisted was 3 in the morning. Through his window, he watched a shuttle arrive at the station's docking bay. Park had made the journey from Earth in record time. Was a neurologist, one of the best humanity had to offer. She was also his former colleague and the only person he trusted to figure out what his laughter had done to the cubs. When she entered his quarters, she looked tired but focused. So you laughed and alien children started glowing, she said, setting down 3 cases of equipment. Normal Tuesday for you. Despite everything, smiled. I am glad you are here. Me too. Now tell me exactly what happened, every detail. Describe the fall, the laughter, the sudden explosion of light from the cub's spines. Listened carefully, making notes on her data pad. And you felt nothing physical, she asked. No dizziness, no strange sensations. Nothing, I just laughed. It was normal laughter. Except it apparently was not normal for them. pulled up holographic displays of anatomy. Their spinal structure is completely different from ours. It is crystalline, not bone. It carries neural signals but also generates bioluminescent responses to emotional states. What you triggered should not be possible according to everything we know about cross-species neurology. A soft chime announced a visitor. Entered, her sensory appendages moving in patterns that was learning to read as cautious curiosity. Dr. Park said, "The Council has approved limited testing. We must understand this phenomenon before we can allow the human delegation to continue." "Agreed," said. "I would like to begin with basic neural scans, then controlled exposure tests if you are comfortable with that." Spine flickered. "My offspring has volunteered. The cub has been asking for the human constantly. This behavior is unusual. Young do not form attachments to unknown species." The testing room was large and sterile, weighted inside, surrounded by scanning equipment. When entered, the cub's spine immediately began to glow with soft golden light. "Fascinating," muttered, watching her instruments. "Neural activity is spiking in the pleasure and bonding centers, but there is something else, some kind of resonance pattern I have never seen before." Positioned herself near her offspring. "We will start with simple verbal communication. Human, please speak to, do not laugh." Knelt down to the cub's level. "Hello, how are you feeling today?" Chirped softly. The spine glow remained steady but did not intensify. The scanning equipment hummed quietly. "Now tell something you find amusing," instructed, "but still do not laugh." Thought for a moment. "Yesterday I tried to eat what I thought was fruit from the station cafeteria. It turned out to be a decorative soap. My mouth tasted like flowers for 3 hours." His head tilted. The cub made a questioning sound. The spine glow remained unchanged. "No response," confirmed. "Whatever triggers the reaction, it is not the content of humor. It is something about the laughter itself." "Very well," said. "You may laugh now." Tried to force a laugh. It came out awkward and fake. Spine flickered slightly but did not erupt into the cascading colors from before. "Minimal response," said, frowning at her data. "Only about 15% of the previous intensity." "I do not understand," said. "The stimulus is the same." "No, it is not," replied. She turned to. "Think of something genuinely funny. Let yourself really laugh." Closed his eyes and remembered his younger brother trying to cook for their mother's birthday. The kitchen had filled with smoke. The fire alarm had gone off. Their mother had laughed so hard she cried, and they had all ended up eating takeout on the floor because the table was covered in failed cake attempts. The memory made smile, then chuckle, then genuinely laugh. Spine exploded with light. Colors had no names for cascaded through the crystalline structure. The cub swayed gently, its appendages extended toward. The chirping sounds it made were musical, almost like singing. The light patterns pulsed perfectly in sync with laughter. "Incredible," whispered. "The neural resonance is off the charts. It is like the brain is synchronizing with yours on a frequency I cannot even measure properly." Once laughter faded, moved closer and gently touched his hand again. The cub's spine continued glowing for another 8 minutes. Over the next 3 days, they conducted dozens of tests. Minyu, a human diplomat, arrived to manage the political aspects of the crisis. He was a smooth talker with an easy smile, but could see the worry in his eyes. "The council is divided," Minyu explained during a briefing. "Elder believes you should be sent back to Earth immediately. He thinks this effect on the cubs could be dangerous, even if we cannot see how yet. But there is another faction, led by a scientist named Ra, who wants to continue research." "What do you think?" asked. Minyu sighed. "I think we are looking at something that could change everything. If human laughter affects cubs this way, what about other species? This could be our chance to truly connect with the galaxy, or it could be the thing that makes everyone fear us." The breakthrough came when they expanded testing to other species. The station hosted representatives from dozens of civilizations, requested volunteers with children. The hen family arrived first. They were amphibious beings with translucent skin that revealed their internal organs. Their child was curious and playful. When laughed at a silly magic trick attempted, the young hen's internal organs began to pulse with bioluminescent light. The pattern was different from the response, but the synchronization was identical. Lights matched the rhythm of laughter perfectly. "It is not species-specific," announced to the research team. "This is something about juvenile neural structures across multiple species. They are all responding to human laughter in similar ways." Appendages moved in patterns of deep thought. "We must consult the elders. They are the galaxy's oldest historians. If anything like this has happened before, they will know." The elders were massive beings that looked like ancient trees with faces carved into their bark. They moved slowly and spoke even slower. When presented with the data, the eldest one made a sound like wind through leaves. "The lost frequency," it said. "We thought it was only legend." "Explain," demanded. In the oldest texts, there are references to a form of consciousness connection that once existed between young minds of different species, a pure emotional resonance that needed no language. It faded from the galaxy as civilizations grew more complex. We theorized that juvenile brains might still carry the capacity for this connection, but that it atrophies before adulthood in all known species. "Are you saying humans can access this frequency?" Minu asked. The elder's branches rustled. "We are saying human laughter might be the key that unlocks it. When a human laughs with genuine joy, they broadcast on a channel that young minds instinctively recognize and respond to." That night sat within the observation chamber. They watched the purple world turn below them. Spine glowed softly, contentedly. "I do not understand why this is happening," said quietly, "but I am glad I met you." Chirped and leaned against his side. The simple trust of the gesture made his chest ache. His communication device buzzed. A message from Earth Security Services. Reports of attempted kidnappings of human civilians by unknown parties. Black market chatter about joy dealers and laughter merchants. The galaxy had learned about the phenomenon, and not everyone had good intentions. Looked down at, suddenly afraid. They had discovered something beautiful, but beauty always attracted those who wanted to exploit it. Across the station, Elder watched the same reports and made a decision. Tomorrow he would call for a vote to expel all humans from space. The crisis was just beginning. Arrived on the station with a suitcase full of props and a smile that could light up a room. She was a comedian from Seoul, and when Earth's government had asked for volunteers to help with the research, she had been the first to sign up. "So I heard you need someone to make alien kids laugh," she said, bowing to the research team. "That is literally my dream job." Liked her immediately. Where he was careful and measured, was spontaneous and bold. Where he worried about protocols, she worried about whether her jokes would translate through alien communication devices. "We should be clear," warned. "This is serious research. We need controlled conditions and careful observation." "I understand," said. Then she pulled a rubber chicken from her bag. "But that does not mean we cannot have fun." The expanded testing program took them to 3 different worlds. First was where hundreds of families wanted their cubs tested. Then the aquatic cities of Hen, where they had to conduct research underwater. Finally, the crystalline forests where the ancient beings grew in groves that sang with the wind. On performed her comedy routine for an audience of 50 cubs. She told jokes about spaceship maintenance and confused tourists, and the time she accidentally insulted a robot by asking if it needed coffee. The cubs' spines created a light show that could be seen from space. Parents watched in amazement as their children experienced something impossible. But was not just there to entertain. She noticed things. After each performance, she sat with the cubs and talked to them. She learned their names, their interests, their fears. She made connections. "They are smarter after the laughter," she told one evening. "Not just happy, smarter. They ask better questions. They understand complex ideas faster." Reviewed her data and confirmed what it observed. Cubs exposed to human laughter were showing accelerated cognitive development. Their problem-solving skills improved. Their empathy scores went up. Whatever the laughter was doing, it was enhancing their minds in ways that persisted long after the lights faded. On hen, they made an important discovery. The young hen, who had been part of the initial tests, had learned to generate the bioluminescent pattern voluntarily, without any human present, could make the internal organs pulse in the same rhythm that appeared during laughter exposure. "This is remarkable," said, studying the scans. "Has internalized the pattern. The neural pathways have been permanently altered." "Is that dangerous?" Minyu asked. He had been fielding calls from worried governments all day. "Dangerous?" The appendages moved in a pattern that suggested deep thought. "No. Development is accelerated in all positive ways. The child is healthier, more social, more creative. If this is danger, then we should all wish to be endangered." But not everyone agreed. Reports came in of protests on multiple worlds. Conservative groups argued that natural development should not be artificially enhanced. Religious organizations claimed that human laughter was interfering with divine plans. Politicians worried about creating dependencies on human presence. The Silents made their first appearance on hen. They were a radical group that believed juveniles were inferior forms of life that should not be coddled or enhanced. They disrupted one of his performances, releasing a harmless but foul-smelling chemical into the audience chamber. Parents grabbed their cubs and fled. "We will not allow you to corrupt our young with your human tricks," the Silence's representative announced before security forces arrested them. "Childhood is meant to be suffered through, not enjoyed." Minyu increased security. Armed guards now accompanied the human research team everywhere. Found himself checking over his shoulder constantly, worried that someone might try to hurt the cubs to make a political point. On the ancient forest world, something unexpected happened. The beings reproduced through seeds that grew into saplings. These young were essentially children, though they looked like small trees. Nobody expected them to respond to human laughter. Told a story about her grandmother getting lost in a subway station and somehow ending up at a kimchi festival 3 towns away. It was a gentle, warm story full of human absurdity. As she laughed at the memory, the young saplings began to glow. Not their spines or internal organs, because they had neither. Their leaves lit up, each one shining like a tiny green star. The elders gathered around, their ancient faces showing something that the translators labeled as wonder. 500,000 years we have existed," the eldest said. "Never have our young shown light. We thought it impossible. We thought we were too different from animal species." "The lost frequency does not care about biology," said, recording everything. "It works on consciousness itself, on the developing mind, whatever form that mind takes." But the news from Earth was getting worse. 3 human civilians had been kidnapped from a colony world. The kidnappers demanded payment from wealthy alien families who wanted guaranteed access to human laughter for their children. 2 of the humans had been rescued, but one was still missing. Earth's government was furious. Some officials demanded that all humans be recalled from alien space until safety could be guaranteed. Others wanted to turn the laughter response into an official diplomatic tool, with strict regulations about who could access it. "We are becoming a commodity," said bitterly. "They do not see us as people anymore. They see us as vending machines for joy." "Then we show them different," said. She had been unusually quiet since the kidnapping news broke. "We show them that this is not about transactions. It is about connection." She organized a massive event on the 500 cubs from a dozen different species gathered in an amphitheater built into a crystal mountain. Parents and scientists and politicians watched from observation platforms. News crews from across the galaxy transmitted the event live. Did not tell jokes. Instead, she invited the cubs to play games. Simple games that children of any species could understand. Chasing, hiding, pretending. She laughed with them, not at them. She let them lead, following their ideas and celebrating their creativity. The light show that resulted was beyond anything they had documented before. 500 young beings, all different species, all with their unique forms of bioluminescence, creating patterns that synchronized and harmonized. It looked like a galaxy was being born in that amphitheater, stars forming from pure joy. But in the middle of the celebration, alarms began to sound. Security forces rushed into the amphitheater. The silence had planted a device, something that emitted a neural dampening field. It activated before anyone could stop it. 500 cubs collapsed simultaneously. The screaming started immediately. Parents tried to reach their children, but security held them back. Medical teams poured in from every direction. Ran too, finding the cub lying motionless on the ground, spine completely dark. "They are alive," a medic announced. "Vital signs are present, but they are not responding to any stimuli. It is like they are trapped inside their own minds." His face went pale. The neural dampening field, it disrupted the frequency patterns. The cubs have been conditioned to expect that resonance. Without it, their brains do not know how to function normally. Spine flashed with colors that the translator rendered as pure rage. "You did this. Your human laughter created a dependency. Now our children suffer because of it." "No," said firmly. She was crying, but her voice was steady. "The silence did this. They hurt children to make a point. Do not let them win by blaming us." But the damage was done. Across the galaxy, the footage spread. Human laughter had put 500 children into comas. It did not matter that a terrorist group was responsible. What mattered was that without humans, those cubs could not wake up. Minu's communication device was overwhelmed with messages. Governments demanding explanations. News agencies requesting interviews. And through it all, one simple question repeated endlessly. What had humanity done? Sat beside medical bed, holding the cub's small hand. The spine that had glowed so brilliantly was now cold and dark. He thought about the first time had touched him, full of trust and curiosity. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." Outside the medical center, protesters gathered. Some demanded that humans be expelled from the system. Others demanded that humans be forced to stay until the cubs recovered. Violence broke out between the groups. And somewhere in the shadows, the kidnapped human remained missing. The black market for joy dealers was growing. The galaxy had learned about laughter, and now it wanted to control it, own it, weaponize it. In her lab, stared at brain scans and neural patterns, desperately searching for a solution. The cubs were not truly comatose, she realized. They were searching. Their brains were trying to find the frequency pattern that human laughter had awakened in them. They were calling out for something they had learned to need but could no longer access. "We have to complete the adaptation," she said suddenly. "We have to give them enough exposure that they can generate the pattern themselves, like learn to do. But we have to do it fast, before the neural damage becomes permanent." It was a desperate plan with no guarantee of success, but it was the only chance those 500 cubs had. Arrived from Earth with a ship full of supplies and a reputation for solving impossible problems. As Earth's Secretary of Affairs, he had negotiated treaties with civilizations that had been at war for centuries. But this crisis was different. This time, children were dying. "Show me everything," he said to the moment he stepped off his shuttle. They walked through the medical center where 500 cubs lay in silent rows. Parents kept vigil beside small beds. The only sounds were medical equipment beeping and occasional soft crying. His bed was in the center of the room, had not left her offspring's side in 3 days. "We think we can help them," explained, pulling up neural scan data. "But we need time and resources. Most importantly, we need volunteers." Volunteers for what? To laugh, constantly, in shifts. We need to flood these cubs with the frequency pattern until their brains learn to generate it independently, like teaching them to walk by holding their hands until they develop the balance to do it themselves. O stepped forward. She was a psychologist who specialized in trauma, and she had been studying the psychological impact of the laughter response since the crisis began. The process will take days, possibly weeks. The humans involved will need to maintain genuine joy and laughter for extended periods. It will be exhausting, maybe impossible. "Then we make it possible," said. "How many volunteers do we need?" "At least 50 working in 8-hour shifts. They cannot fake the laughter. It has to be real." Within 6 hours, volunteers began arriving from Earth. Some were comedians-like. Others were teachers, parents, people who worked with children. They came because 500 cubs needed them, and because humanity had accidentally created this problem. Now humanity would fix it. But Elder had other plans. He called an emergency session of the Collective Council and demanded an immediate vote to expel all humans from collective space. "They have created a weapon disguised as joy," announced to the assembled representatives. "Our children are vulnerable to them. We cannot allow this to continue." Minyu attended the session, trying to argue humanity's case. "We did not know this would happen. We are trying to help. Please give us a chance to make this right." "You have made our children dependent on you," said. "That is a form of control, intended or not. I will not allow that to be controlled by anyone." The vote was scheduled for the next day. If it passed, all humans would be forced to leave, including the volunteers who were the only hope for the comatose cubs. In the medical center, the recovery protocol began. The volunteers worked in teams, spending 8 hours at a time with groups of cubs. They played music, told stories, shared memories that made them laugh. They used every trick they knew to generate genuine joy in an environment filled with despair. Led one of the teams. She sat on the floor surrounded by 20 unconscious cubs and talked to them as if they could hear. "I am going to tell you about the time my cat decided she was a dragon," she said, smiling through her tears. "She climbed to the highest shelf in my apartment and refused to come down. She just sat there, judging everyone who walked past. My roommate said we should call the fire department. I said the fire department had better things to do than rescue a cat who was not even stuck, just dramatic." She laughed at the memory, and her team laughed with her. The cubs remained motionless, but instruments detected slight changes in their neural activity, barely measurable but there. "It is working," whispered. "Slowly, but it is working." Then the mercenaries attacked. They came during a shift change, when security was briefly distracted. A team of heavily armed figures in black armor stormed the medical center. Their leader, unnamed, had been hired by someone who wanted human volunteers captured and sold. "Nobody moves," announced, raising a weapon. "We are taking the humans. Try to stop us and the cubs suffer." Stood up slowly, placing himself between and the volunteers. "These people are helping children. Your children. Let them finish." Laughed, a harsh sound nothing like human laughter. "Children are expensive to raise and provide little value until adulthood, but humans who can make them glow, those are worth fortunes. Now step aside." The standoff lasted 7 minutes. Security forces surrounded the building. News crews broadcast everything live across the galaxy. Parents in the medical center refused to evacuate, forming a protective ring around the volunteers and their unconscious young. Stood beside. Her spine flickered with colors that needed no translation. She would die before she let anyone harm the humans trying to save her offspring. "You will not take them," she said quietly. "I am head of research for the collective. I have access to every biological weapon ever. Touch these humans, and I will make you regret that you were ever born." Hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, security forces breached the building. The firefight was brief and violent, and most of his team were captured. 2 mercenaries escaped. But the damage was done. The council vote was now inevitable. Elder had the evidence he needed. Humans were causing chaos and violence wherever they went. As medical teams checked everyone for injuries, something impossible began to happen. Spine flickered, just once barely visible, then again stronger. "Dr. Park," a medic called out, "we have neural activity. Multiple cubs are showing responses." One by one, the cubs began to glow, not the brilliant cascading colors of laughter exposure. This was different, softer, more controlled. The light pulsed in perfect synchronization across all 500 cubs simultaneously. "They are doing it themselves," said, staring at her instruments in disbelief. "The sustained exposure worked faster than we predicted. They are generating the frequency pattern without external stimulus." The lights grew brighter. The cubs' eyes began to open. Parents sobbed with relief. But the cubs were not looking at their parents. They were all looking at the volunteers, at the humans who had spent days laughing for them, crying for them, refusing to give up on them. Sat up slowly. The cub's spine glowed with steady golden light, looked at and made a chirping sound that was full of something the translator could not quite capture. Gratitude, affection, recognition, all of those and more. "The human did not hurt us," said, the words translated clearly for the first time. "The human saved us. They all saved us." Across the room, 500 cubs were waking up, and every single one of them was glowing with light patterns they were generating themselves, no longer dependent on human laughter to trigger the response. In the council chamber, Elder prepared to call the vote, but then a message came through, broadcast on every channel. Images from the medical center, the cubs waking up, their independent light generation, their testimony about the humans who had helped them. And something else, something that made every council member lean forward to look closer. The cubs' light patterns were not random. They were communicating, not with words but with pure emotional resonance. The cubs from different species were sharing feelings directly, understanding each other on a level that transcended language. The elder spoke, its ancient voice carrying weight that made even listen. "This is the lost frequency," the elder said, "not as a weapon, not as a tool of control, but as a gift. Humans did not make the cubs dependent. Humans taught them to access something that was always inside them, something we all lost when we became adults, something we can now see again through the eyes of our young." Stood silent for a long time. His spine flickered through colors that suggested an internal struggle. Finally, he spoke. "The vote is postponed. We need more time to understand what has truly happened here." It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. In the medical center, sat with and watched as the young demonstrated the new ability. The cub could make the spine glow whenever wanted, could control the colors and patterns. But more than that, when concentrated, other nearby cubs would begin to glow in response, their light patterns synchronizing and creating something beautiful. "You taught us the joy sound," said. "Now we can share joy with each other, even when you are not here." "That is amazing," said softly. "Will you stay?" asked. "Will you teach us more?" Looked at all the volunteers who had given everything to save these children. He saw the exhaustion on their faces, but he also saw hope. "We will stay," he promised, "for as long as you need us." 3 months after the crisis, Research Station Meridian 7 looked completely different. Where before it had been sterile and quiet, now it buzzed with the energy of hundreds of young beings from dozens of species. The station had been transformed into the galaxy's first interspecies juvenile research center. Lee was 8 years old, and he had no idea he was about to change galactic history. He had come to the station with his parents, who were part of the second wave of human volunteers, thought the alien cubs were amazing, had become his best friend despite being a crystalline being who communicated partly through light. "Watch this," said, concentrating hard. The young spine began to glow, shifting through colors deliberately. Blue for calm, gold for happy, red for excited. "I can make any color now." "That is so cool," said. "I wish I could do that." "But you can do something better. You can make the joy sound." Laughed just because it seemed like the right thing to do. Immediately, spine flared brighter, and 3 other cubs playing nearby began to glow in response. But this time, something new happened. Felt something. A warm sensation in his chest, like his heart was humming in tune with the lights around him. "Did you feel that?" he asked. "Feel what?" "I do not know, it was weird. Good weird." Had been monitoring the cub's progress when her instruments detected the anomaly. Neural resonance was flowing both ways. Had received feedback from the cub's frequency patterns. It should have been impossible. Humans were supposed to broadcast the frequency, not receive it. She called an emergency meeting with and the elder who had taken up residence on the station. "This changes everything we thought we understood," said, displaying the scanned data. "If humans can receive the frequency pattern as well as transmit it, then the connection is bidirectional. It is not humans teaching cubs. It is humans and cubs learning from each other." The elder's branches rustled softly. "Perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. We asked why human laughter affects the young, but we should have asked, what is human laughter really doing?" Over the next few weeks, they expanded the testing. They discovered that adult humans who spent extended time with the frequency-adapted cubs began to develop sensitivity to the emotional resonance patterns. Not as strongly as the cubs could generate them, but enough to sense the general emotional state being broadcast. Was the first adult human to successfully receive a clear emotional message from a cub. Was trying to explain something complicated about mathematics, getting frustrated with the limits of translated language. Then the cub stopped talking and just concentrated. Felt a rush of understanding, not words but pure concept. He suddenly knew exactly what had been trying to say. "I understood you," said, amazed. "Not the words, the meaning behind them." More discoveries followed. Ra, one of the original 20 cubs from the first incident, had recently reached adulthood. Normally, this meant the loss of many juvenile traits, but Ra retained full control over spine bioluminescence. More remarkably, Ra could generate the frequency pattern strongly enough to trigger responses in other cubs, just like a human could. "I remember what it felt like," Ra explained to the research team. "The joy sound from the humans, it is not gone from me. I can access that feeling whenever I want and I can share it." The elder made the sound of wind through ancient branches. This is what was lost. Adults in every species used to retain this ability. We could share pure emotion, pure understanding, but we lost it over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Human laughter is not creating something new. It is reminding us of something we forgot. The political situation had stabilized somewhat. Minu had negotiated what became known as the Laughter Accords. Humans would be granted special status within the collective as frequency carriers. Strict protocols governed how humans could interact with juveniles, with severe penalties for exploitation. But the Accords also recognized that this was a beneficial relationship, not a harmful one. Earth established the Department of Joyful Exchange, was appointed director, a role he had never imagined for himself, ran the scientific division, led field operations, training volunteers in how to work with cubs ethically and effectively. The real breakthrough came when they opened the first interspecies school on humanity's colony world. It was called Haven, a planet of rolling hills and clear blue skies. The school was built into the landscape, all natural materials and open spaces designed to accommodate species with wildly different needs. 500 students enrolled in the first term, young beings from across the collective, including 50 human children. Lee was one of them. The curriculum was experimental, designed to teach not just facts but understanding. Cooperation not just between individuals but between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. On the first day of classes, something beautiful happened. The teacher, a human woman named Song Myra, was explaining the concept of ecosystems. She used the example of a forest, how every part depends on every other part. The students listened, cubs of 20 different species all sitting together. Then one of the hen students asked a question about water cycles. Before Teacher Song could answer, a young sapling began to glow. The light pattern was complex, layered. Every student in the room suddenly understood not just the concept of water cycles, but what it felt like to need water, to draw it up through roots, to feel rain on leaves. The sapling had shared its direct experience. A cub added its own light pattern, sharing the experience of crystalline formation, of how water molecules arranged themselves into the structures that made up its body. A human child laughed in delight at the beauty of it all, and that laughter triggered a cascade of shared joy that linked every mind in the room for a brief, perfect moment. Teacher Song stood frozen, tears running down her face. She had felt it too, the connection. Every student's perspective simultaneously, a glimpse of how the universe looked through a dozen different types of senses. "That was the lesson," she said quietly. "You just taught yourselves better than I ever could." News of the incident spread quickly. Schools across the collective began requesting similar programs. Adult humans who had grown up with the frequency connection reported that they never fully lost it. They carried it into adulthood, becoming bridges between species in ways that had never been possible before. Ra, the progressive scientist, published a paper that became the most downloaded document in collective history. Its title was simple: "The Children Will Lead Us." In it, she argued that the frequency-adapted cubs represented the next stage of galactic civilization. They could share understanding across species barriers instantly. They could feel each other's emotions, know each other's needs without words. As they grew into adults, they would build a galaxy founded on empathy rather than negotiation, understanding rather than treaties. "Humans gave us the key," Ra wrote, "but our children are opening the door." 5 years after had first laughed in that ceremonial chamber, he sat in a garden on Haven and watched the students play. They moved together like a school of fish, their movements synchronized in ways that seemed almost choreographed but were actually spontaneous, responding to the emotional resonance flowing between them. Now a young adult sat beside him. The spine still glowed with easy control, shifting colors to match mood and thought. "Do you remember when we first met?" asked, "when I fell down and laughed?" "I remember," said. "I remember the light inside my spine, how it felt like waking up to something I had always known but forgotten. I remember thinking that the human sound was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. It was just laughter. Humans do it all the time." "Yes," said, "and that is the gift. Not that you can trigger our lights, not that you can broadcast on the lost frequency. The gift is that you never stopped. Every other species in the galaxy grew up and became serious. You grew up and stayed joyful. You found reasons to laugh even when things were hard." Ran past, chasing a group of alien cubs through the garden. They were playing some game that seemed to have no rules except move fast and laugh a lot. The boy's laughter rang out clear and genuine, and all around him, young aliens lit up in response, their various forms of bioluminescence creating a moving rainbow. "Why do you think humans kept the laughter?" asked. "Why did you not lose it like everyone else?" Considered the question carefully. Maybe because we need it. Humans face death. We face loss and pain and fear. We are not the strongest species or the longest lived. So we learn to find joy in small things. We learn to laugh at ourselves, at the absurdity of existence. We learn that sometimes laughter is the only thing that keeps darkness away. Then you gave us light to fight our darkness too. No, said gently. We reminded you that you already had that light. You just needed to remember how to use it. That evening, the school held its first performance showcase. Students from every species presented something about their culture. There were demonstrations of crystalline singing from cubs, bioluminescent poetry from young hen, even a dance by the saplings that made the ground itself seem to move in rhythm. When it was the human student's turn and his friends did something simple, they told jokes, not complicated ones, just silly stories about everyday absurdities, the kind of humor that 8-year-olds found hilarious. They laughed together, genuine and unself-conscious. And the entire auditorium erupted in light. Every cub, every frequency-adapted being in the room, glowing in synchronization. But this time, the adult humans in the audience felt it too. That warm resonance in their chests, that sense of connection and understanding. Even who had been so suspicious at first felt something. Her spine flickered with colors she had not experienced since her own childhood. For just a moment, she remembered what it was like to see the universe with young eyes, full of wonder and possibility. The elder stood at the back of the auditorium, ancient branches swaying slightly. The lost frequency is found, it said softly. Not lost at all, just waiting, waiting for someone to remember how to laugh. 20 years later, a new generation would emerge. Adults of multiple species who had grown up with the frequency connection, who had never lost it. They would reshape the collective into something unprecedented. A true union not of politics or economics, but of shared consciousness and mutual understanding. They would build ships that crews from different species could operate with perfect coordination. They would solve problems that had seemed impossible by sharing perspectives instantly. They would create art that combined the sensory experiences of a dozen different types of biology into something transcendent. And they would remember the humans who had taught them, not because humans were superior or special, but because humans had never forgotten something simple and profound. That joy shared is joy, that laughter connects us all, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the ability to find something funny even when everything seems serious. Would live to see some of this future. He would watch become a leader in the Resonance Initiative, working to help other species rediscover their own connection to the lost frequency. He would see the galaxy slowly transform into something more beautiful than anyone had imagined. But on that first showcase evening, standing in an auditorium full of glowing children laughing together, he knew only one thing for certain. They had not taught the galaxy to laugh. They had reminded the galaxy that laughter mattered. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything.